Okay, well, let's begin. Let's continue. So we are picking up Lamed Vavam Abayz 36b, and we are picking up the third line down from the top for Seifo, from the top. The Seifo Klei Dinasa Shomer Lepri. So let's just remember again, just to orient ourselves a little bit. So remember again, we were speaking about the caper bush. And remember again, in the caper bush, so halacha l'maisa, again, the Gemara was suggesting that you make a bracha on the berries and not on the husks, not on the shells. So the Gemara says, but 1 second, you should make the bracha of ha'etz on the husks as well. Why? V'seifuk le'vari. Mincha before. I figure we do it in the base medrash. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, perfect. And then we'll do shir in there at 8:20. And then they'll have the regular minyan in here at 8:20. All right. We're getting a new building. Amir Sasha, everything is gonna have its place. Amir Sasha, in just a little while. Okay, so the Gemara says ourselves, so go ahead and why don't we say that halacha l'maisa, the husk should be considered to be a shomer, literally against something that watches the fruit. And the Gemara says, "V'rachmana amar v'araltem arlasa es pirio as atafa lepri." Shabbos says, so the Gemara says something very interesting. The Gemara makes a drush, Torah says a drasha, v'araltem es arlasa es pirio. Literally, again, you shall treat the fruit like arla. So the word es generally is a ribui. Es usually comes to include something additional. In this case, the es comes to include that which is secondary to the fruit. What's an item that is considered to be secondary to the fruit? The husk. So here you see, now Gabos said, I just want to point out, there's like a lot of halachas colliding over here on one page. So right, our focus, at least from the beginning, was the halachas of brachos. Now the Gemara is saying, well, the truth is, let's analyze what our bracha should be based on arla. Remember again, what's arla? You plant a tree, for the first 3 years, or vines, you can't eat the fruit. Can't eat the fruit, right? It just literally, again, is left to waste. So the Gemara says, the Gemara makes a drasha that it's not only the fruit that's subject to arba, but it's even the parts of the plant that are secondary to the fruit. What's secondary to the fruit? The shells or the husks. So interestingly enough, you see from it that the husks, in this case the caper bush, the husks are considered to be also a fruit as well. If that's the case, technically speaking, it should get the same bracha ultimately again as early mincha for the Hilchos Shabbos. Good. Base medrash. You're more than welcome to stay here also. It's not, it's Amud Yomi then. All right. I even tried to send that. Yeah. All right. Baruch Hashem. Too many things. Good problems. The Gemara says follows. So the Gemara says, so ultimately, again, what does this refer to? That which guards the fruit. So you see from here that which guards the fruit has the status of fruit itself. Amar Rava. So Rava says, Heicha minon dinas shomer lepri. So the Gemara says, so Rava says like this, but when do we say that something is considered to be a shomer, a guard, right? Literally, again, something that is secondary and part of the pri. Heicha di'isei being betalish ben milchuber. That's only when the husk, or whatever is guarding the fruit, so to speak, is attached to the fruit, both in its attached and detached forms. Hacha b'mechuber isei betalish lasei. Here's what's interesting. What's interesting is in the case of the caper bush, so apparently, again, the caper berry has its husk when it's attached to the ground, but does not have its husk when it is detached from the ground. Okay? So Abaye raises a kasha, pitma shal rilam mitzarefes. So now, another body of knowledge. There's a whole bunch of stuff being thrown at us over here. So pitma shal rilam. So we'll say the pitma, Rashi says over here, pitma shal rimon is haperach sheberosho. You know, so you ever see like a pomegranate has like a flower-like thing. I don't know what the technical term is. The halachic, the Gemara's term is pitma, like kind of like an esrog has a pitom. So the pomegranate has like that flower-like growth at the, what is it? The stem, yeah. The flower-like growth. The pitom, right? So the pitma sharim mitzarefes. So this is very interesting. So the halach is like this: food has the ability to contract tumah, to contract ritual impurity. But food only contracts ritual impurity if it is food of a certain size. How large does food have to be in order to contract ritual impurity? So the Gemara says kibetza has to be the size of an egg, the volume of an egg. The volume of an egg. So now, when calculating, so let's say I have a pomegranate. The pomegranate, as long as it's the size of an egg, could contract tumah. Now here's what's interesting. The Gemara says, when looking at the size of the pomegranate, we also include the volume of the flour, of the pitum, as part of the food. So the Gemara says, pitum shalom mitztarefes, v'haneitz shalo eino mitztaref. But the nates, so we'll say, so the nates apparently is a type of shell-like thing that grows on top of the pomegranate. That does not combine to form the requisite share, the requisite amount for the pomegranate to go ahead and become tamei. So the Gemara says, now watch this. The Gemara says, the fact that the nates, which is like the husk-like item of the pomegranate, does not combine to form the requisite amount of pomegranate to make it necessary to contract tumah. So the Gemara says, Amma delav olchahu. That shows you that it's not food. That in other words, the husk is not considered to be an edible part. The Gemara says, Utinan gavi arla. Yet we learned when it comes to arla, klipe rimon v'haneitz shalo. Literally, again, the shells of the pomegranate and the nates, which is again that shell-like item, klipe egozim vagarinin, or the shells of nuts or the seeds, chayav and ba'arla, are all subject to arla. Ela amarava, Rava says like this: Heichaminon denasalu shomer leperi. When do we say that something is considered to be a shomer, a guard, so to speak, for the fruit? In which case, it's considered to be like the fruit itself. When it is present as part of the fruit at the time that the fruit is finished. However, high kafris leise b'shas gemar peira. So apparently, again, it's interesting to know, in caper berry maturation, so the husk is there at the beginning, but by the time that the fruit is fully finished, the husk is no longer present. All right. Ini is that so? Baham Rab Nachman, Rab Barabua. Hani mischali de arla asiri. This is interesting, I must say. So mischali de arla, Rashi says is betamri kekafros bitzlaf. So apparently dates have a husk-like covering as well that covers over them. So if you have dates with their husk-like covering that are arla, it's aser, right? It's prohibited. In other words, that the husk-like covering of the dates has the status of arla. Hoil v'nasu shomer leperi. Ultimately, again, since it's considered to be something that guards the fruit, the shomer leperi emesavi. But ultimately, when does it guard the fruit? Bekufra, only when the dates are very small. In other words, that as the dates mature, that outer husk-like part falls off. So the Gemara says, yet, even though the husk-like part does not remain with it until full maturation, nevertheless, v'kakarde shomer leperi. Nevertheless, it is called the shomer. It is called something that guards the pre. See, what do you see from here? You see from here that even if something is not with the fruit until the stage of complete maturation, it's still considered to be a shell or a husk, and ultimately, again, still has the status of the pre. Rav Nachman said like Rabbi Yossi. Rav Nachman holds like Rabbi Yossi. What does Rabbi Yossi say? Disnan Rabbi Yossi Omer. Disnan Rabbi Yossi Omer. Smadar aser mipnei shu pri. Suppose say another interesting halacha. If you take a look at Rashi is almost right across to the left. Smadar aser anovim kevan shenafal haperach v'chol gargir nira liatzmo kori smadar. So we'll say smadar is an early stage of maturation of grapes. An early maturation stage. Now, what's happening during the maturation stage of smadar? So the perach, like the flower-like item that grows on the cluster, has fallen off. The grapes themselves are still small. So this is considered to be an early state of maturation. So smadar aser mipnei shupri. So smadar is going to be aser because of arla at that point already, because it's a fruit. Upligi rabbanon alei. And the Rabbanon go ahead and argue on this. I'm saying, Pligi Rabbanon alei. So Maskiv Rav Simon Ada, Ubishar Iloni mi Pligi Rabbanon alei. Do the Rabbanon argue when it comes to other trees? Vatran we learn, Me'ema Sayin Kotet Sena Sayilonos B'Shiyas. From what point in time, we'll say a whole bunch of stuff here. From what point in time are you not allowed to cut down trees during Shemitah? So let's talk about this for just a moment. Take a look at Rashi. In Kotet and B'Shiyas, Rachmana Amar li Achlav lo lehefset. So also it's interesting. Something fascinating happens during a Shemitah year, which means what happens? Everything becomes hefker, everything becomes ownerless. So I walk into a field, it's not my field, I could take from the produce, I could do whatever I want. Now, let's say, again, it is my field, of course I could take the produce as well. During Shemitah, you're allowed to take produce, you can't cut down trees during Shemitah. Now, in general, there's a general prohibition to go ahead and cut down fruit trees, right? Baltashchis. You can't engage in wanton, unnecessary destruction. Shemitah is even more than that. Shemitah, in general, you can't cut down trees. You could eat whatever you want, you could partake of whatever you want, but you can't cut down trees. So Yomar says, so we'll say, so from what point and on does this prohibition apply? So Beis Shammai says, Kala ilonos mishiyotziu. Beis Shammai says, all of the fruit trees, the moment that they begin to sprout forth their fruit, that's ultimately, again, when the prohibition begins. So Beis Hillel says, Hacharuvin mishi yishrishu. So the carob trees, when the carobs begin to form interlocking chains with each other, V'hagifanim mishi yigru. And again, the vines, the grape trees, when the grapes become large enough, literally, again, the size of a garua, we'll talk about that in just a moment. V'azesim misheyanitzu, and the olive trees, when they sprout a flower on the top. Ushar kalilonos mishiotziu, and all the other fruit trees, when they begin to blossom, when they begin to bud. V'am Rav Asi, hu bosar, hu garua, hu pul halavan. Rav Asi says this is the stage that's called bosar, right? Bosar, which is a good stage of development, also called garua, also called pul halavan. Now, pul halavan literally means the white lentil. The Gemara says, pul halavan sakalaita. What does white lentils have to do with anything? Ela ema shi'uro ke pul halavan. Rather, again, what we mean to say is that the size of the produce in question is the size of the white lentil. The size of the white lentil. Okay. So the Gemara says, man shamas asabosai. So remember again, what are we doing over here? That's a great question, right? What are we doing over here? So remember, we're just trying to figure out, from a tree perspective, what is considered to be halacha l'maisa, part of the fruit, and what's not part of the fruit. What's pri, and what's shomer l'pri. That's what we're trying to figure out over here. So man sham mislei, the amar boser in smadarlo. So I'll say, who is the opinion that says that it is only problematic when the fruit reaches the advanced stage of bosar, but not the earlier stage of smadar? So the Gemara says, Rabbanon, it's Rabbanon v'katani, ushar kalilonos mishiotziu. And they say when it comes to all the other trees, ultimately, again, one is not chayiv al tzarlo until they produce fruit or until they blossom. Ela amarava, heichaminim dahavi shomer lepri. So also going back full circle, when do we say that a husk or a shell is considered to be a shomer, something that guards the pri, and as such is accorded pri status itself? This is very interesting. So we'll say, when is the shell or the husk considered to be a shomer, considered to be essentially the part of the fruit itself? When, if you were to remove the shell or the husk, the fruit would wither and die. So if the husk or the shell serves that pivotal purpose, namely that it allows for the fruit to develop, and the removal of it would cause the premature demise of the fruit, then the husk or the shell is considered to be part of the fruit itself. I'll say in the case of the caper bush, so apparently, again, good to know, caper bushes, if you go ahead and you remove the husk or the shell, the fruit will be fine. So because the fruit will be fine, therefore the husk of the shell doesn't have the status of the pri of the fruit itself. Okay, so the Gemara says, Hava uvda v'shaklua l'neitz derimona v'yave shimona. So there was a story. The Gemara said they tested this out. They tested this theory. And what did they do? They removed the nates. They removed the flower of the pomegranate, and the pomegranate withered and died. But yet, v'shaklua l'parcha devitisa v'kayim bitisa. But yet they removed the shell or the husk of the caper berry, and Baruch Hashem, the berry was just fine. So I will say, so it appears over here, based on the Gemara, that halacha l'maisa, whether or not the husk or the shell is considered to be part of the fruit itself, depends on whether or not the husk or the shell is necessary for the maturation and development of the fruit. If it is, then it's given the status of the fruit. If it's not, then it's not given the status of fruit. Let's read the parentheses. We'll stop here for tonight. He goes on. He says, "Behilchasa kemar baravashi." So we'll say the halacha is like Ramar baravashi. Dezarak esavyonos va'achal esakafrisin. So we'll say the halacha is that by arla, you throw away the fruit and you can eat the husks. Meaning that the husks of the caper bushes caper berries are not considered to be like the berries themselves. And since for other purposes, remember again, arla, you're not allowed to eat the fruit. So therefore, if you have a caper bush that is arla, you have to throw away the berries, because the berries are the fruit, and you can eat the husks. Why can you eat the husks? Because the husks are not fruit. That's our paskening. Therefore, the Gemara says, and once we know that again, for arla purposes, the husks are not considered to be fruit. Therefore, the gabi brachos nami lav perininu. Therefore, for brachos purposes, the husks are also not called fruit, and therefore, v'lo mevarchinan alei borei priya eitz ella borei peri ha'adama. Sefer Rabosai, the Gemara concludes by saying, therefore, halacha l'maisa, essentially when it comes to caper berries, the berries are the fruit, the husks are not. They're still edible, but they're not considered to be the fruit. Therefore, when it comes to arla, you have to discard the fruit, but you can eat the husks. And when it comes to brachos, the fruit, the caper berry fruit, will get a barei priya eitz. But if you eat the husks, because the husks are not the primary fruit, you'll only make a barei priya adama. Shkoyach. Anything and everything you ever wanted to know about caper berries. Right here it is, I will say. All right, Shkoyach. We'll continue here, Meretz Hashem, tomorrow night. Tomorrow we get actually some really good cases about peppercorns. Peppercorns, but all right, to be continued. So interesting. Halacha Ma'aseh Berachos also.